I ended up needing the help of my husband to put on my shoes, to get dressed, to squeeze out toothpaste, and here I was a dentist. So it was a really humbling experience, and one that I fought against because I thought I could figure out how to find the specialist or someone to get back to the way I was.
Hello, Mrs. Kaufman. Welcome to Heiligenkreuz. Thank you very much for coming here. We're very glad to have you here and have you also tell us about the initiative you started about the children's rosary. So you're traveling the world, spreading the rosary devotion among children, most especially in parishes. And we are very curious to hear, how did this all start? I mean, what personal story do you have with the rosary? I guess that there is something special here.
Oh, thank you so much. So I did grow up as a young person, very active in my church. I grew up Catholic, and I was working at my church rectory and went to World Youth Day with Pope John Paul II. But in my 20s, when I went to go on to study further dentistry to become a dentist, I found that I really became a lukewarm Catholic. I was just going to Mass on Sundays, but I really didn't have a prayer life. And right when I graduated from a residency to become an endodontist, which is someone who does root canals and surgeries, I joined a private practice. I was practicing. I had met my husband in the medical school. He was finalizing his training in medicine. We had purchased a home. In all accounts, we were doing well. I found out that I was pregnant with ultimately our son, Asher. But at the same time, I was having a lot of problems with primarily my hands, but other joints throughout my body. And it became so problematic that I was dislocating joints in my hands so that I could no longer practice dentistry. And at that point, I was diagnosed with a fairly rare genetic condition that I was born with, but I didn't know that I had. And it starts to become more significant in your 20s and 30s. So the geneticist told me that after my son was born, I was pregnant at the time, that I would see a big decline in my abilities to do many normal things. Some people would get better, but maybe I wouldn't. And as he predicted, I did have a big decline after my son was born, where my joints in my body became very unstable. So it's the genetic defect is in the collagen, so it affects skin and organs in the body, but very severely your joints. And because of the dentistry that I had done, my hands were particularly affected, but also my ankles. So I had problems walking, even just more than across the room. So I ended up needing the help of my husband to put on my shoes, to get dressed, to squeeze out toothpaste, and here I was a dentist. So it was a really humbling experience, and one that I fought against because I thought I could figure out how to find the specialist or someone to get back to the way I was. And at that same point, we were also contemplating our future as a family, that we wanted to have more children. But the geneticist said this was not recommended. So we ended up increasing our family size by adopting 2 children from an orphanage in Kazakhstan. So they only spoke Russian. So within this one act, we went from a family of 3 to a family of 5. And these 2 children were siblings. One was 8 and one was 4, so they were older. And after about 2 years of having this decline of my body, I finally got to the lowest point where I had been fighting against really what the Lord was drawing me to, which was a different path, so to speak. And I finally surrendered. And I was liken it to, I was like a puddle on the ground. I was just nothing. I was physically in serious pain throughout my body with different dislocations. And I had to give up my private practice and was needing help with so many things. But at that moment, I went to confession, and hope came into my heart. And that began a new chapter where I began to go to daily Mass and pray the Rosary after Mass. And I started to feel drawn to pray the Rosary with our children. And so this began the new chapter of our praying the Rosary at home in the evenings. And so the Lord really had worked our soil of our hearts to prepare us for something new that ultimately we would do.
This is so fascinating. And this is also then the moment where you started to think about spreading the children's rosary, or just getting other young children to encounter the rosary, encounter Our Lady through the rosary. Right?
Well, it was interesting is that this really wasn't, I didn't have any ideas of my own about promoting globally the rosary. It really started with a call from help from our priest that ran our parish. We were having financial problems in our church, and he had come before the congregation and asked for an increase of donations, or else he was worried the church may have to join with another church or close. So he asked for help, and after a couple of months, not much had changed. And so in prayer, an idea came. Maybe we should bring our children to pray for our parish because the prayers of children are so strong. So I wrote a letter to our priest, and he gave permission. And on April 10th, 2011, we gathered a small group of children in our lower church named after, interestingly, the Holy Family. And the children led the rosary. Some of them had disabilities, which was interesting. We didn't seek out children with disabilities, but that's what Our Lady brought to us. And that weekend, we had the highest collection of financial funds for the church, second only to Easter and Christmas for the remainder of the year. So it was this huge increase, and no one really knew that the children were praying for this. So it was a beautiful signal grace of the power of the prayers of children. And so after that, I spoke to the parents and I said, should we just do this one time, or maybe we should create a prayer group where we meet monthly? And so for about a year and a half, we just met as a little prayer group with the children leading the rosary. And now the focus was shifting from obviously the financial situation of our little church to supporting the prayer lives of those children and helping them to grow in holiness through prayer of the rosary. And we prayed a number of many, actually, we prayed to 850 saints, 9-day novenas, asking that the children's rosary would be the extended hands of Mary and Jesus. And so we're just saying, Lord, use us. And on the feast of Our Lady of the Holy Rosary, a year and a half later, another children's rosary formed on the other side of the United States. And then more groups began forming. People began to hear about this in a very, we call it grassroots way. So people would hear, and it spread to more parishes in the United States and then into Africa and other parts to Australia and Europe and other regions of the world. So we're now in 34 countries. And not only now in parishes, but we also had groups form in schools and orphanages.
So you're actually devoting your whole life to this mission.
It has really encompassed really my life. I have been able to go back and teach part-time in our dental school. So I teach part-time there, and we've been homeschooling our children. So very much present in the home, but it's really, our whole family has really stepped up to help support this effort. I mean, because of the disability with my hands, which persists, I need help with many things. I can't drive. My husband still puts my shoes on. I'm not in as much pain. Certain areas of my body have stabilized some, but I'm still very vulnerable to travel. So if I get bumped, I can have a very severe injury. And most people would never even think a small bump would do that to somebody. But because of the problems, particularly in my hands, all of our kids have had to step up, and we end up sending many handmade rosaries around the world. So I think it was April, we sent 52,000 handmade rosaries to dioceses in Uganda, where we've been working to spread the children's rosary. And so as we have about 200 people who make rosaries for us around 200 groups around the United States, usually older individuals making rosaries. They want to help the children's rosary, and they send them, and my children, they count the rosaries and then rebox them or barrels. So they've been the hands of this operation when my hands haven't been strong enough.
Many hands to help, yes, and also many things that you're doing. I see that you actually bring out, or you edit and publish also booklets about the Holy Rosary and teaching children how to pray it. And I'm just wondering, I mean, the Rosary is a well-known devotion. Why do you think it is important to have all of that accompanying it, to spread it, like a website for children's Rosary and books, etc.? Why do you think this is necessary?
Well, very early on in the prayer group movement, a very holy priest happened to visit our parish, and he said, you need a little book that helps people to understand why would they want to bring their children to Our Lady, to the Rosary, the role of children in the church, and also how do you start a group? And something that if someone's interested, they could take to their priest and say, Father, look, I'd like to start this in our church, or to a principal. And so we created this little book. I like to compare it to a seed. You know, if someone has this little book, it's like a seed, it can grow into a group. And this is what all you would need, because it explains everything inside. So it tells you the steps. And the steps are, first, ask permission from your priest. Can we start a children's rosary? And whatever requirements in your diocese to work with children you would want to fulfill. But then the groups can only meet in parishes, schools, and orphanages, not in homes. So you would ask the priest, is there a time that I can have access to bring the children around the altar, ideally? We usually have the children kneeling in front of the altar, taking turns going to the podium, leading the prayers, because they love having their little voices at the microphone. And there's really a grace that comes when you lead the prayers. It creates leaders, and we've seen that. And we've heard from priests in Africa and other places that said, this is really developing leaders in our church from a young age. And so you pick a location, preferably there, but sometimes the priest will say you can have access to a room, which is okay, or you can have it during adoration, which is beautiful. Then pick your frequency, weekly, monthly, or in some countries we have them meeting daily. And then invite several families. You don't need a lot of children. We're talking about 5 children, 6, maybe 10 children. So don't be overwhelmed. We don't have a lot of children in our parish. You don't need a lot. Maybe 1 or 2 families are able to come together, but it's very, very powerful. Of course, you know our Lord says when 2 or more are praying together, there am I in your midst. So these really become lights, and you know our Lord is the light of the world. And so when you have these little groups forming, they really do illuminate, so to speak, bring light. And these tender hearts are fertile soil. So you don't have to do, in the children, you don't have to weed. You only have to plant seeds. So they're just, when you see a 4 or 5-year-old praying, I often will see one stroking. We usually put a statue of Our Lady in front of the children. I'll see a child stroking the statue. It just comes naturally. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And you know that at those moments that there is something very deep going on that will help to root that child in faith for their whole lives.
So I'm gathering from what you're telling me that when children meet in the parishes, they have the statue, they kneel in front. So you have a whole, let's say, not choreography, but maybe this is a word that fits approximately. I guess this is something that you have developed over time, because you saw that it had an impact. How did you observe how it helped the children to really get into the prayer?
Children like little tasks, and they like routine. And so what we do is we always make rosaries available and the little books. So if you have some older children, and we're talking the ages of these children would be between 4 and 14, but if you have families with littler ones, they can be there too. They're watching, and they can, as they're comfortable, come up to kneel. But we place the rosaries out in the little books, and so in the beginning, we put a box out for the intentions before they'll kneel, so they can write out things that are worrying them, their family, their parents, their parish, and maybe the priest of their church. They can write all these and put them in. We do ask that each group pray for our Blessed Mother's intentions and all the other members of the Children's Rosary and all who help the Children's Rosary. In this way, they're being covered by this tapestry of prayer around the world. We're not an intercessory prayer group movement, meaning we don't just pray for peace, for instance. It's really focusing on that, supporting the prayer lives of the children, but we do see that it's important that they know that they can bring what's worrying them. So that little box is placed. Now the children, we sometimes put pillows so they know they're to come up and kneel, and we'll put a hard wooden box so they can stand up to go to the podium. Often I'll pair an older child, maybe with a younger one. So the younger one is maybe just holding up pictures of the mysteries, while the older one is saying the prayers. So the older child is being engaged by helping the little one, and the little one's looking up to the older one. So there's this really nice relationship you have with a mixed age group. Another optional component is flowers. And this the children really love. We invite them to place a flower at the end of each decade while we ask for the fruit of that mystery. So the fruit of the first joyful mystery, and they're listed in the book, is humility. Or the second sorrowful mystery, the fruit is purity. And what parent doesn't want their child to remain pure, be humble? And in this, you see how the Rosary does help sanctify the children, is that their grace is poured out on them as they're praying. So the flowers, some groups may want some candles, we have a theme song they can sing at the end. And you can also add other songs if you'd like. Children love to sing. So, and then we cap it off at the end with a little fellowship time, maybe some cookies and things, so that they have sometimes maybe step out of the church and talk to their friend, have something sweet, and a juice box, some milk. And it really makes it quite enjoyable for the children to come together in prayer.
Wonderful. And I guess not only for the children, I guess that there is a lot of impact that you have observed also across all of these, in all of these parishes, etc. What impact does it have on the people that come along with it?
Well, interestingly, we've seen older individuals who just want to come and see the children pray. We've had parents whose children have grown up in the Children's Rosary, and they still come even when their children are now older, because they feel the graces, that simplicity that I was describing of them. It has an effect on us, as an individual. Also, a lot of young families, they didn't grow up praying the Rosary. I didn't grow up praying the Rosary in my family. And so as they start to think about how am I going to increase prayer, maybe they don't know how to start that. And so this Children's Rosary is a way where actually the kids have a real hand in helping their parents. And there might be even some older individuals in parishes that think, oh, I wish that we had young families praying. I wish my grandchildren were praying. They can start these groups. You don't need children. And often our Lord and Our Lady, they need that faith that you might find in an older individual who's prayed the Rosary their whole life or has the time to create these little groups and invite families. And I always encourage them, make a direct connection. Don't just put it simply in a bulletin, for instance, but approach a family and say, I'm starting a group. I don't have any children of my own. They're grown or something. Or they might be a young person who's 18 and says, I don't have any children of my own, but I want to help the church. And would you consider coming monthly or weekly to my group? You get their information, their email, and create a little list. Remind them before the meetings to help them create this special time in prayer, because they may not be doing it at home.
What I find interesting about all this is what you also said, that many people don't actually learn how to pray the Rosary while they're young. And still it also has some kind of an antiquated feel to it when you tell somebody, somebody who's maybe not that close to church, I'm praying the Rosary. And you will always think of an old lady who is having this nice devotion that doesn't affect your own life. But please tell me a bit why the Rosary is actually something that has real vital life in every day and is not that antiquated.
Well, many people also think that the Rosary is a prayer really about Mary or something like that. But what they might not realize is that this is really a Christ-centered prayer. Is that it's a way that that the Church in its richness has created this beautiful prayer that helps you to contemplate the life of Christ, and in a way that at the very first looking at it, you might think, this is quite long, this is how are all the pieces going together? But it's something that I've seen with young children, that we don't sit them down when they come to the Children's Rosary and say, this is how you pray a rosary. We just bring them in. It's almost like riding a bicycle. It's like your parents don't sit down and say, a bicycle works like this. They just put you on the bicycle and they run alongside you. And eventually the parents let go and you just go. And so that's very much how the rosary, I think, is best imparted to someone. Is just like for myself, I started going to daily Mass and I started to stay after Mass. And there were these women praying the rosary. And I just started to pray with them. Just like when I came here to Heiligenkreuz, I had never prayed the rosary in German. And so my first night, I went to the chapel and prayed with you all. And I was listening. I felt like one of those little children that was listening to the prayers and, oh, okay, I see this word and that. And I could see after one rosary, someone can learn how to pray it in just praying with one time. It's that, and that's why it's really very good for children, because it's very repetitious. It's very repetitious. And I remember asking my kids one time when we were praying, what are you thinking about? And I kind of thought they were going to say, playing outside, blah, blah, blah. And it was interesting. They were thinking about the mysteries, and I asked them, which ones do you like? And there was a whole laundry list of which ones they liked. And so it was really an eye-opener to me that you think you have to do a lot of things, but our Lord and Our Lady do a lot in hearts without you having to do anything if you bring an adult or a child to prayer. So the heavy lifting is really done by our Lord. You just have to give Him an open door. And that's what this prayer movement, these time of prayer, the rosary, is you're opening the door and asking for the help. And asking for the help of our Blessed Mother and her Son. Help me be holy.
So it actually helps us to also develop the inner child, like God who wants us to be like children in confronting Him or before Him. So as you describe this, it sounds to me like this is how you can be a child of God.
And I think people will see, and if you have a devotion to the rosary, you may understand what I'm saying, is the longer you pray the rosary, you begin to see that our Lord and Our Lady, they draw your hearts to things above and less here. And so when your heart is looking above to where our ultimate end will be, certain things become less interesting to you, and other things become more. And so one of the things I've witnessed in our family and myself is, an interest in the simplicity of life. This being drawn to working the land or putting aside, we used to have a TV room, and slowly the TV moved out and the prayer things moved in, and it became like a little home chapel. And so it wasn't something that happens like overnight. It's a gentle process of, where you become more sensitive to what you're wearing, about being modest, a surrendering of what's to come, and asking our Lord to guide every piece. So you see the process happen, and it's very gentle. And the rosary is the instrument, I think, that Our Lady has given to us as her children to lasso us and bring us closer to her Son.
And you're a handmaid of the Lord, because you're lassoing the children around the world and parishes to start praying the rosary. What do you think, maybe you can tell us, you're a mother, how does it feel for a mother to see your children praying? What does it mean to you?
Well, I have felt very much through the years, especially bringing in adopted children, I see my deficiencies as a mother. And so I rely heavily on our Blessed Mother and the prayers to support me in my vocation as a mother, because I only want the best for them, and I see all of the many challenges there are to raise children in society today, and I count on the help of Our Lady and our Lord. And so when I see my kids praying, it gives me peace, it gives me assurance that no matter what things are going on right now that I one could be worried about. I know in the long term that they will provide for them and they will see to their salvation.
Oh, beautiful. Just the last question, actually. So what comes next for the Children's Rosary? What's your vision? Where do you want to go?
Well, the little book I mentioned, we have in English, Spanish, and French. We're coming out with the German version, within the weeks. So if you look on our German website, you'll be able to find out information about how to get this. So we're working in multiple languages, really trying to include as many children and make it accessible as possible. And I think I was sharing with you too, we have another resource for families and priests, but it's a consecration to Jesus through Mary, a 33-day consecration journey in the spirit of Saint Therese of Lisieux. So it's that growing in simplicity, confidence, and trust. And we have it in English, and we're releasing it in multiple languages, Dutch, we're working in Spanish, French, and we're hopeful for German too. So there's resources for families to grow in holiness and to continue to go forward.
Nice. Thank you very much, Mrs. Kaufman. Thank you for coming here, and God bless you for your mission.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.